Imagínate que de repente a cualquiera de ustedes llega una víbora y los muerde. Y la víbora se va. ¿Y ustedes con qué se quedaron? Con el veneno, ¿no? Es el odio, el rencor, el resentimiento. ¿Para qué lo queremos? Entonces que agarren a la víbora, ¿verdad? Pero hay que sacar nosotros el veneno.
With these words, Father Francisco Bautista was trying to convince his parishioners of the need to forgive the person who had caused the violent death of Deacon Leonardo Avendaño, with whom the priest had a strong relationship. This case shook Mexico, the Catholic Church of that country, and the parishioners who could not understand who had the motive to take the life of the young deacon, especially when the main and only suspect was a priest who had been in the priesthood for more than 20 years. This is a shocking story of a fatal attack whose motive was never entirely clear. So what happened? Let's follow the details in this video. Welcome to the Crime Documentary Files channel. The story of Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos takes place in the Miguel Hidalgo neighborhood in Mexico City's Tlalpan municipality. For over 15 years, Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos served as the pastor of Cristo Salvador Catholic Church. He shared with parishioners who attended out of conviction and Christian faith, participating in several activities promoted by the church. He also attended social events within the community without a cassock, like an ordinary citizen. Father Francisco had been admired, respected, and loved by his parishioners since his arrival at the church in 2004. The Miguel Hidalgo neighborhood is named after the military priest who played a role in the initial phase of the Mexican Independence War and is also known as the father of the country. This neighborhood is known for its high-quality services and education, as well as its bustling commercial activity. A lot of people, both residents and visitors, go through this important area of the Mexican capital every day. Many of these visitors sought Father Francisco, who was believed to possess both soul and body healing powers. On Alfredo B. Bonfil Street, it was common to see long lines of believers gathering at the church, especially on Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. On these days, Father Francisco received local and foreign parishioners of all ages and social backgrounds. They came with the hope of being heard and having their problems resolved. During these 3 days each week, parents could be seen outside the parish with portraits of their children. Some had addiction problems, others had disappeared, and some had been abducted, putting their lives in danger. People with physical pain or spiritual afflictions also came to the parish. Cases of demonic possession and evil spirits deserved special mention. Although there were very few, they too received attention. Father Francisco had become famous for his healing acts and exorcisms. This way of proceeding, very different from that of most priests, led him to be a regular guest on television shows specializing in supernatural topics. He also published the book Psalms and Prayers to Heal the Soul. All this contributed to the priest's reputation and the spread of his special abilities. There was a particular ceremony that made him look very powerful. Sometimes the rite occurred in a temple bench corner. On other occasions, in front of the atrium or standing face to face with the believer. In any of these forms, the rite of reception was fulfilled, during which the parishioner unburdened their sorrows while the priest listened and prayed. The duration varied according to the seriousness of the case. If necessary, the religious man turned to one side, and with a subtle movement of his head, he indicated to Gile to pass him the oil that Father Francisco would then smear on the believer to end the reception. For the closest parishioners, Gile's presence was normal. It was said that the father discovered that the 60-year-old woman had a special gift. That is why she was his shadow in every healing act or exorcism. She lived a few blocks from the church and, together with her husband, sold various religious articles outside the temple. Before becoming the pastor of Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, Father Francisco addressed the Maria Reina Catholic Church, another nearby temple, also in the Miguel Hidalgo neighborhood. Since those years, he had already begun to become famous for his exorcism rituals. In fact, there are still those who claim that he received training in the Vatican for this type of practice. On the days when the rite of reception wasn't held at the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, the temple was still very crowded because of the masses that started very early in the morning. Father Francisco received the sick who came to Mass as early as 7 a.m. and anointed the foreheads of the believers to heal them. The versatile religious man wasn't only dedicated to his ecclesiastical duties, but was often seen sharing and accompanying the community in various social and sporting events, as well as during different celebrations and other community activities. He enjoyed great admiration and much appreciation from his parishioners, who thanked him for being so close to his community. In addition, he promoted various local improvements and encouraged the development of recreational and sports activities. The closest members of the parish believed blindly in this shepherd of souls and testified to the supposed miracles and healings performed by the priest. That is why they followed Father Francisco with unwavering faith, completely convinced of the religious vocation he discovered when he was very young. Hugo Leonardo Avendaño also found his vocation at a young age. A boy from the community who, as the years went by, became Father Francisco's right-hand man. Hugo accompanied and assisted him in different areas within the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church. Leo, as he was affectionately called, was born in Mexico in 1990 into a traditional family. He grew up with his parents and his brother Josue Vicente Avendaño. He always liked to study, and since he was a child he was very intelligent, polite and kind to people. He had the desire to help and serve them through his faith in the Catholic religion. While still very young, Leo decided to become a priest after finishing his high school studies and chose to study theology at Intercontinental University. After graduating, he decided to continue his education at the same university and enrolled in the master's program in psychoanalytic psychotherapy. He combined his subjects with missiology to get the specialization as a missionary and evangelizer, while also focusing on the scientific principles of psychology to have the necessary tools to analyze mental disorders. The young man had a very clear religious stance that he used to share in his posts on social media. He expressed his ideas in favor of the church, as well as his criticisms and disagreements regarding certain aspects of society. Like many young people, Leo liked to travel around his country and the world. He also enjoyed learning about new cultures. At some point in 2012, Father Francisco and the young man's paths crossed, and over the years they became very close. The priest knew Leo's family well. The attachment became stronger in 2015 when Leo became his deacon. He was a very cheerful and devoted young man, always helping the priest and the community at the parish. Given the close relationship between Father Francisco and Leo, it was usual for them to schedule different meetings in the evening hours. Many of these meetings extended into the early hours of the morning, when each would resume their personal agendas. The last time Josue heard from his brother Leo was Tuesday, June 11th, 2019. As usual, the young deacon and Father Francisco would meet that evening to work on some church business. The young man was wearing blue pants, a light shirt, and black shoes. On Wednesday morning, June 12th, Josue was a little concerned when he tried to reach Leo and was unable to speak to him. Leo hadn't returned home either. Then Josue received a call that increased his distress. Father Francisco contacted him to say that the young deacon had not shown up at the church despite their agreement. At that time, there was a lot of uncertainty in the community. People were afraid because, by the middle of 2019, the violence figures in the Mexican capital were alarming. Authorities had registered nearly 700 homicide victims, almost 30 kidnappings, and more than a dozen femicides. In addition to these worrying statistics, the cases of Aide Mendoza and Norberto Ronquillo had a deep impact on public opinion. 2 students were killed in strange circumstances. At that time, the authorities had not shown truly solid progress in clarifying what had happened and catching those responsible. Amid this climate of great uncertainty, Josue decided to go to the prosecutor's office and report the disappearance of his brother. He was attended to at the office, specialized in the search, location, and investigation of missing persons, where he said that Leo had gone to the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church the day before, around 11 p.m. He specified that neither he nor the rest of the family knew where the young deacon was at that moment. According to Josue's statements to the authorities, his brother was going to meet with the parish priest. To make the search easier, the authorities asked him what route Leo regularly took. In detail, Josue told them that he normally took the route from his house in the Aculco neighborhood in Iztapalapa along Axis 3, and then the inner loop to the exit of the Tlalpan municipality. Finally, he joined the viaduct that led him to Insurgentes Avenue, and from there to the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church. The information about Leo's usual route was the starting point for the official investigations to find, hopefully, at some point along the route, some clue about his whereabouts. Finally, Josue declared that his brother had sent a message to a friend on the night of June 11th, telling him that he would meet Father Francisco at the church and stay overnight at his house. While Josue was giving his statement at the prosecutor's office that same Wednesday morning, June 12th, the Secretariat of Citizen Security received a call reporting a suspicious car that had been abandoned in the Heroes de 1910 neighborhood on Eucalipto Street and La Marina Road. Ernestina Godoy said,
A las 9:30 horas del día 12 de junio, la Secretaría de Seguridad Ciudadana recibió el reporte a través del 911 de un vehículo abandonado con una persona al interior, en un paraje de la colonia Héroes de 1910 en la alcaldía de Tlalpan. A las 10 de la mañana llegan al lugar elementos de la Secretaría de Seguridad Ciudadana, quienes aprecian el cuerpo de una persona al interior del vehículo y se da aviso inmediatamente al Ministerio.
Authorities from the Public Prosecutor's Office and police officers responded to the call and went to the scene to begin investigations. When they inspected the grey Chevrolet vehicle, they discovered the body of a male in the back seat, estimated to be 25 to 30 years old. He was covered with a yellow blanket. The investigators immediately requested the presence of forensic medicine and criminalistics technicians. During the preliminary inspection, the experts determined that there were signs of physical abuse on several parts of the young man's body, especially on his face. They even recorded that he had lost some teeth because of the violent attack. They concluded that his life might have been taken by asphyxiation, but they would have to carry out all the pertinent studies to determine and clarify what happened, as well as to identify the victim. The forensic analysis allowed for the identification of the body found inside the car. It was the young deacon Hugo Leonardo Avendaño Chavez, who, at only 29 years old, had been killed by pressure applied to his neck to prevent the passage of air after a fierce and very violent attack. With all this information, the authorities provided Josue with the details of the macabre finding. From that moment, his brother's report changed from the office specializing in disappearances to the section of the prosecutor's office in charge of homicides. Expressions of grief and demands for justice were not long in coming. Visibly moved family members, friends, students, and members of the community started different protest actions. It was a time when the feelings of loss in society were at their peak. Since just 2 days before, public opinion had heard the news of the kidnapping and subsequent fatal attack against Norberto Ronquillo, a student of international marketing at Pedregal University, Students from several academic and educational institutions joined together to make a video that circulated on different social media networks. With great sadness but also firmness, they demanded that the authorities fulfill their duty to protect citizens and conduct a swift investigation to clarify what happened and arrest the offenders. In the video, the young people demanded justice for Leo and for the thousands of missing people in the country. They identified themselves as members of several public and private universities, including Pedregal University, the National Polytechnic Institute, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and the National Pedagogical University, among others. They raised demands for peace and tranquility, expressing their desire to go out safely to study, work, and have fun without threats to their safety and risks that would prevent them from returning home safe and sound. They demanded their right to live in a safe country. Francisco said,
Sí, yo lo reconocí ayer, sí, ¿verdad? Y pues es doloroso ver cómo quedó, pero pues bueno, ya le toca a las autoridades hacer su trabajo. Sí, tenía huellas de violencia.
A day after the discovery, on Thursday, June 13th, 2019, Leo's body was taken to the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, where his funeral wake would be held during the night. Father Francisco officiated the funeral mass in honor of his deacon, and later offered some statements to the media. Francisco said,
Es una comunidad que está muy conmovida porque pues son cosas que pues se van haciendo ya como cotidianas, ¿verdad? No solamente aquí en lo que es por ser la comunidad área, sino que hay secuestros, que hay robos, ¿verdad? Y eso se va intensificando, o sea, no solamente son los dos estudiantes, ahora se están promoviendo en la televisión, sino y los demás qué, ¿no? Los papás, los niños, los que están sufriendo todo esto, pues qué pasa, ¿no? ¿Cuánta gente está haciendo?
During his statements, the priest referred to how moved the community was, not only by Leo's case, but by other cases that had also resonated in public opinion. He regretted that episodes such as those that had occurred were becoming a daily occurrence. Robberies, unlawful deprivations of liberty, and crimes against life. All of these were keeping parents, children, and the community in general in constant anguish. Francisco said,
Esclarezca lo que ocasionó todo esto, lo que ellos prometieron, ¿no? Que hagan su trabajo, pero repito que también que nos involucren para que pues estas cosas disminuyan, ¿no?
Despite the difficult circumstances in which he was expected to be moved by losing his right-hand man and the person closest to him, the priest acted completely normally. During his statements, he spoke very calmly, with a calm voice. No one could imagine the dark secrets that this, apparently peaceful and charismatic religious man was hiding. 3 days after Leo's farewell mass, authorities issued an arrest warrant for Father Francisco. The prosecutor's office, as well as Mexico's Attorney General's office, had indisputable evidence incriminating him. Based on those reports on June 16th, the control judge issued the arrest warrant. 3 days later, on Wednesday, June 19th, 2019, the priest was arrested and transferred to the Oriente Men's Prison located in Mexico City. The investigations carried out allowed the Attorney General's office to obtain several videos in which Leo was observed in his vehicle arriving at the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church a little after 11 p.m. Also, it was recorded that his departure was at 3:16 a.m. on Wednesday, June 12th. At that time, the deacon left the church accompanied by Father Francisco. The cameras located at different points along the public road captured, at about 3:26 a.m., Leo's vehicle during its journey from the church along the Picacho-Ajusco highway until it reached the place where it was finally located in the Heroes de 1910 neighborhood. The arrival of a second vehicle was also recorded a few minutes later. In the video, it was seen clearly that Father Francisco boarded that car and left the place after about 13 minutes. Finally, on Wednesday, June 12th, A little after 4 a.m., the security cameras captured the second vehicle as it drove down the Picacho-Ajusco highway. It was driving away from the area where Leo's vehicle was abandoned and where his body was eventually located. Rodrigo de la Riva said, "At 10 p.m., the victim sent a message to a person close to him stating that he would spend the night at the suspect's home." According to the C5 camera images, the vehicle remained inside the home of the suspect without moving from 11:04 p.m. on June 11th until 3:16 a.m. on June 12th, that is, 4 hours and 12 minutes. At 3:48 a.m., the C5 camera again captured the vehicle heading towards the place where the victim was found. According to Attorney General's office sources, Mexico City authorities requested the issuance of an immigration alert to prevent the priest from leaving the country. This measure was justified because they had a recording of the priest on board a vehicle on his way to the airport. Ernestina Godoy said,
Nuestro trabajo de investigación de la Procuraduría será riguroso, continuará siendo riguroso, apegado estrictamente a derecho, respetuoso de las garantías y derechos humanos de las víctimas, sus familias y de quienes sean imputados de alguna presunta responsabilidad.
Two strong pieces of evidence further implicated Father Francisco. The first was the discovery of a message in which Leo told him that he had arrived at the church. This important piece of information was obtained after the young deacon's phone was checked. The second piece of evidence was that the investigating authorities found the keys to Leo's vehicle in the priest's possession. Despite the evidence against him, the priest denied having met with his deacon. He referred to the call he had with Josue a few hours after Leo's disappearance, in which he affirmed that Leo had not attended the scheduled meeting. Although the investigations pointed directly at the priest, his parishioners believed in his innocence and were ready to defend him vehemently. Reactions were not long in coming. As soon as the arrest became known, a group from the community organized to protest and affirm that the most serious of injustices were being committed. Ana Lilia said, "Unfair, terribly unfair. We are very dismayed and hurt. The authorities are not doing things properly and are crucifying a just man, an incomparable man. We would like to have a high-level politician like him." Garcia Hernandez said, "How is it possible that they believe that, for God's sake? Have all of you lost your feelings? Have you all? Everybody is sensationalist. They make up stories, for God's sake, and they still eat and sleep peacefully. I can't believe it. God is watching us." The case soon became the topic of conversation and speculation both publicly and privately. Rumors were everywhere, prompting Attorney General Ernestina Godoy to address the gossip officially. She ruled out the possibility that Leo had been kidnapped by illegal groups, noting that the family had not received any ransom calls asking for money. She also dismissed the theory of a crime of passion, despite some media spreading this news. Godoy emphasized that, based on the characteristics of the case, it was being investigated as a homicide. Josué Avendaño said,
Con nadie tenía conflictos, no tenía enemigos, trataba de siempre llevarse bien con todos. Igual cuenta como por lo de maestría, le gustaba mucho escuchar a la gente y siempre tenía un consejo. No es solamente yo que soy su hermano, pueden preguntar aquí en la congregación.
According to information published by some printed and media news outlets, the authorities had found some very compromising pictures on the deacon's tablet. These appeared to document intimate meetings involving Father Francisco and other priests, leading to speculation that extortion was the main reason for his death. However, this theory was not confirmed by investigators, and the case followed a different line of inquiry. The victim's relatives also dismissed this hypothesis entirely. Lourdes Murguia, an investigative journalist with access to the case file, gave a scoop on a TV show. She confirmed the line of investigation that authorities were pursuing after the arrest of Father Francisco, who was considered the main suspect in the deacon's death. The hypothesis involved extortion, but not due to passion. Instead, Leo had apparently uncovered several irregularities in the administration of parish resources. Based on the data in her possession, Lourdes reported that authorities had found compelling evidence pointing directly at the priest. According to Mexican law, investigators had between 3 and 24 months to gather all the evidence needed to prove their case and clarify the events. As part of the important revelations, the journalist highlighted Leo's lifestyle, which seemed to involve expenses far exceeding those of an ordinary student, as Leo did not work and dedicated himself to his studies. He had no major income sources beyond monthly support of 10,000 pesos, about $600, from his mother, who passed away early in 2019, ending that support. Leo was not known to have any employment, and his income from the church was not constant. However, the young man had made different trips to places like Miami in the United States, Aspen in Switzerland, and even the Middle East. Another curious fact was the vehicle he owned. How could it be explained that the deacon drove a new, expensive and latest model car? He also had a state-of-the-art cell phone. Finally, there was no way to explain how Leo, a few days before his death, was able to rent a house near the parish for which he would have to pay about 6,000 pesos a month, approximately 350. In fact, the young man had invited his family to come and see the apartment, and they had planned to do so on Friday, June 14th, 2019. That meeting never happened because someone took his life. Lourdes also noted that Leo had significant amounts of cash and money in bank accounts, with several transfers that he received from Father Francisco. The more details were revealed, the more implicated the priest seemed in everything that had happened. However, he remained firm in his position of innocence and did not provide any relevant information about Leo's lifestyle. Again and again, Father Francisco claimed that he had nothing to do with the death of the young deacon. Father Hugo Valdemar, former spokesman for the Archdiocese of Mexico, confirmed the same to the media after visiting Father Francisco in prison. Father Hugo condemned the actions of the authorities, accusing them of manipulating the evidence. He assured the media that despite everything, Father Francisco remained calm and that the defense lawyers would present the respective proofs of the priest's innocence. Jorge Cuadra said,
Desde luego, porque se basan simplemente en un seguimiento vehicular para determinar quién fue o no responsable de un homicidio. Ya se determinará, no podemos adelantarnos a lo que el juez determine. Pues son 30 minutos que se dan de receso y ya podremos ver a fondo lo que resuelva. No son claros. Ya presentaron, la Fiscalía presentó los videos, nosotros estamos presentando una pericial en criminalística tendiente a desvirtuar lo que la Fiscalía pretende acreditar con esos videos.
The priest's lawyers, Jorge Cuadra and Jorge Pinuño, also asserted the priest's innocence and questioned the investigation's development. In their opinion, the videos presented, which placed him with the victim at the scene of the crime, were not sufficient to hold him responsible for taking Leo's life. Just as the ecclesiastical representatives defended the priest vehemently, the community was on the same line of action. The demonstrations of support and solidarity from Miguel Hidalgo's inhabitants for Father Francisco were unwavering. From the moment they learned of the priest's detention, the community maintained a steadfast attitude over the following months. An important group within the community insisted that the authorities had made a mistake and that Father Francisco could not have committed such an abominable act. The parish priest's defenders did not limit themselves to prayers or demonstrations within the church. They took their discontent to the streets, leading to several protests. Community members called for Father Francisco's release with banners, cardboard and clothing signs displaying messages of support for the priest. They insisted on his innocence and demanded his release. A large demonstration completely shut down the southern part of the busy Insurgentes Avenue. They also gathered at the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, where, after praying, they loudly proclaimed the priest's innocence and demanded his release from the authorities. Public: "The priest is innocent. The priest is innocent." Journalist: "This is how Cristo Salvador parishioners protested." During the demonstrations in favor of the priest's release, community members also denounced the alleged excesses committed by the media. They accused the media of spreading false information about the case and sensationalizing it. Some individuals expressed their anger by threatening to physically harm and expel journalists from the parish. More than a year after the terrible attack that resulted in Leo's death, the Avendaño family reported that in early December 2020, the first hearing was held in the trial court in Oriente Prison. There, Father Francisco was serving preventive detention as the main suspect in killing the young man in the early morning of June 12, 2019. Both the prosecution and the defense presented data, evidence, and all the elements collected to be analyzed during that first hearing. During that session, the only family member who gave statements was Leo's cousin as a witness. On the other hand, some neighbors and shopkeepers near the Cristo Salvador parish still could not believe that such a charismatic and close priest was guilty of killing the deacon. Some locals admitted that they stepped away and stopped attending the parish after all that happened. In April 2021, after evaluating all the evidence presented, the court found Father Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos guilty of the murder of young Hugo Leonardo Avendaño Chavez. Leo's brother, Josue, informed that the decision to declare him guilty was made collegially and that the evidence against the priest was solid. From then on, it only remained to wait for the sentencing hearing to be held later. Josue Avendaño said,
Como el asesino al padre Francisco Javier Bautista Avalos, pues los jueces, ya que fue colegiado, llegaron a la resolución que él había sido la persona que le quitó la vida a mi hermano, ya que se quedó súper claro que no fue un accidente.
On April 9, 2021, Father Francisco was sentenced to 27 years and 6 months in prison for ending Leo's life. In addition, he was ordered to pay a sum of 422,000 pesos, about $25,000, as reparation for damages to the family members. In the same sentencing hearing, it was informed that the religious man would not enjoy any benefit instead of the prison sentence because it is a case of aggravated homicide. The defenders of the priest informed that they would appeal the court's decision, considering that they had enough arguments in favor and insisting on his innocence. On social media, the priest posted that in the next few days, the necessary steps for the appeal of the sentence would be taken. He asked his followers to wait for it and said that they would be informed about it. Father Francisco always maintained his innocence and swore that he was in his bedroom that night. He said he regretted Leo's death, but claimed no responsibility for the event. However, the geolocation of his cell phone placed him at the place where the deacon's body was found. Not only that, both his and Leo's cell phones had the same geolocation during the whole sequence of events of that early morning. The images recorded by the security cameras added to this. And finally, he was blamed for not being able to explain why the keys to the young man's vehicle were in his possession. For believers, religious temples are a place for reflection and meditation. They are also a place to open their hearts and humbly surrender to God. However, on some occasions, as in our case today, these spaces have given rise to different situations that, far from doing good, have generated pain, sadness, and even indignation. This was another sad example of how heartbreaking it can be when a religious man gives in to temptation and allows himself to be dragged into darkness. Josue Avendaño said,
sobre todo para que pues me ayuden a que pues este caso no sea uno más y encuentren a los responsables, sobre todo a los que sí fueron. No espero que me pentan así a cualquier que agarren y este fue el que mató a tu hermano. Sí, lo único que le exijo a las autoridades es que realmente encuentren a quienes le hicieron esto a mi hermano.
These words that we chose for the closing were from 2019, when Josue was asking for help to clarify what happened to his brother and for those responsible to pay for what they did. Although justice was served in this case, the pain endured by the Avendaño family is irreparable. Hopefully, the responsible authorities can act effectively to prevent such situations from occurring again, so that cases like Leo's are never repeated. Well, dear audience, this investigation is over. What are your thoughts on today's case? We would love to read your comments. Your opinion about the cases is very important to us. Remember to always be respectful to both the victim and the other viewers, as well as to us who will be reading your comments. Before you leave, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, please share this video if you believe someone you know might be interested. See you next time. Goodbye.